morning, students. I hope you're all doing well. In our previous lecture, we had covered the Quit India movement, and we had discussed that by the end, a constitutional deadlock had emerged between the Congress and the Muslim League. One of the important effects of the Quit India movement was that it was able to convince the British that the continuation of British rule in India would not be possible for a long period. That is why the British became more serious about transferring power to Indians. Right? And in this backdrop, there were two main contenders which had emerged, the Congress and the Muslim League. While the Congress had been able to pressurize the government into thinking seriously about leaving India, it was actually the Muslim League who gained the most out of the Quit India movement. Why? Because it had been able to fill the vacuum in practical politics that had been left behind by the Congress. In the absence of the Congress, the League had been able to wrest control of all the Muslim majority provinces, and this had brought the League at parity with the Congress. Therefore, the government was no longer in a position to deal with the Congress alone. It would have to deal with both the Congress as well as the मुस्लिम लीग. ठीक है, तो केवल कांग्रेस की सहमति से काम नहीं चलेगा, मुस्लिम लीग को भी कन्विंस करना पड़ेगा. However, this was easier said than done because the Congress and the League differed from each other on three fundamental questions. कौन से questions? The question of the nature of the union. Congress was interested not only in the freedom of India but also in the future unity of India. So it wanted a single union. The Muslim League, on the other hand, since 1940 was demanding Pakistan. So it did not want a single union, it wanted two separate unions. Second question on the basis of which these two sides differed was the nature of the federation. That in case partition of India was not possible, then what should happen? Should the Federation of India have a strong center or a weak center? Congress always wanted a strong center. Whereas the Muslim League, what did it want? A weak center. Why? Because there were 5 Muslim majority provinces where the League was convinced that it would be able to build upon its previous success and gain majority, right? And in that scenario, it did not want a constant interference from a strong center. It wanted the bulk of powers to reside with the provinces. It wanted residuary powers to be with the provincial governments as well, right? It did not want the center with a Hindu majority and where probably the Congress is always going to dominate to interfere unnecessarily with the internal affairs of the Muslim majority provinces. Okay? So that was the second issue. Third issue, the question of minority representation. When it came to Indian Muslims, what was the League claiming? That it was the sole representative of Indian Muslims and the Congress should not claim that it represents all Indians including Muslims, right? So League claimed that it represented Indian Muslims exclusively. ठीक है? On the other hand, was this proposition acceptable to the Congress? No. Congress claimed to represent all Indians, including Muslims. Right? And they considered that important questions should be answered by all the people of India and not the minorities alone. So, will the Congress support ideas such as minority veto? No. On the other hand, what will the League demand? Complete minority veto. Would the Congress support the idea of special representation to minorities? No. So it rejected special representation, whereas the League would say that Muslims are in minority and they are in danger of being overwhelmed by the Hindu majority, and therefore, in order to protect their interests, they should have special representation, right? And what should this special representation look like? Separate electorates as well as a reservation in excess of population, right? On the other hand, Congress is going to reject both these tools as well. Is this clear? Instead, they are going to demand universal adult franchise to become the basis for popular exercise, for democratic exercise. ठीक है? तो तीन क्वेश्चन समझ में आए हैं जिनके ऊपर डिस्प्यूट था दोनों के बीच में. अच्छा. Now, over 1944 and 1945, from the Indian side, two attempts were made to resolve the constitutional deadlock. The first, known as the CR formula or the Rajaji formula. It was proposed in 1944 by CR. कौन है राजा जी? That is C. Rajgopalachari. ठीक है. क्या प्रपोज किया सी राजगोपालाचारी ने? Firstly, that the League should endorse the Congress's demand for complete independence. Right? And while India becomes a completely sovereign power, power would have to be transferred immediately to an interim government of Indians. And in this interim government, the Congress and League should be equal partners. That means out of all the cabinet positions, the Congress and League should get the same number of ministerial positions. Thirdly, a plebiscite should be conducted in the Muslim majority districts of northwestern and northeastern India. When? Immediately or after the transfer of power? After the transfer of power. To identify the Muslim majority districts of northwestern and northeastern India, a special commission must be constituted after independence. Okay? So, a commission to identify the Muslim majority districts after independence. And what would be the question posed before the people of these Muslim majority districts? That whether they wanted to remain part of India or whether they wanted to become part of the new country of Pakistan. Okay? Question would be creation of Pakistan. Okay? And who is going to participate in this plebiscite? All the people living in the Muslim majority districts, not only Muslims in the Muslim majority districts. All the people would vote. ठीक है? Now, चांसेस किसके ज्यादा थे कि मुस्लिम मेजोरिटी प्रोविंसेस में अगर सबका वोट लिया जाएगा तो व्हाट वुड दे वांट? क्रिएशन ऑफ पाकिस्तान और यूनिफिकेशन विद इंडिया? Creation of Pakistan. That is why the CR formula is known as a tacit acceptance of Pakistan. ठीक है? तो एक होता है एक्सप्लिसिट एक्सेप्टेंस, एक होता है टैसिट एक्सेप्टेंस. टैसिट मतलब बिना बोले किसी चीज को बोल देना. ठीक है? सो इट डिड नॉट agree with the league's demand for Pakistan, but without saying so, it accepted the demand. ठीक है? Now, in case the plebiscite gave up results that favored the creation of Pakistan, what then? So, in case of partition, a common center would control things such as defense, communications, currency, commerce, and external affairs. ठीक है, तो कंप्लीट पार्टीशन नहीं होगा. Is this clear? That neither the Union of India nor the Union of Pakistan would have complete sovereignty. Over some issues, they would have shared sovereignty. Clear? And secondly, the border districts suppose ये नॉर्थ ईस्ट इंडिया के जो मुस्लिम मेजॉरिटी डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स हैं उनमें से इंडिया से लगे हुए बॉर्डर डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स हैं. Now, these districts, they had a mixed population, of partly Hindu population, of partly Muslim population. Border districts would in this case also be partitioned on the basis of the award of that special commission that we had discussed in the previous point. ये जो commission to identify the Muslim majority districts है ना, इसका एक additional task होगा, that would be to partition these districts themselves. Border districts would be partitioned by a special commission. Right? Finally, all these provisions would come into effect when? Immediately or after the transfer of power? After the transfer of power. ठीक है? So these were the provisions of this CR formula, of the Rajaji formula. Clear? Now, Gandhiji, who had been under arrest since the 9th of August 1942, was released in May of 1944. Why? Because by this point of time, the Quit India movement had also quietened down significantly. Therefore, the government was now looking for a way to win back the goodwill of Indians and engage with the Indians with regards to the constitutional future of India. Secondly, in the war itself, the British had made significant gains. By this point of time, Europe was on the verge of being invaded and the Japanese advance had been halted. Okay? The Soviets were pushing back the Germans, right? And Berlin and Germany itself was now coming under attack. Therefore, the urgency felt by the British earlier with regards to, or the pressure felt by the British earlier with regards to the chances of an Axis invasion of India, they had also decreased, right? And therefore, the British were ready to provide amnesty to the Indians. And thirdly, the Allied pressure on Britain was also building up. Americans wanted the British to liberate India. Why? Because they wanted Indian shores to be opened for American commerce, for American business. Okay? The Soviets were also pressurizing the British because the communist ideology is opposed to the idea of imperialism, and the Soviets wanted to increase their influence in India. This would not have been possible under the imperial rule of Britain, right? So, because of these factors, Mahatma Gandhi was released in May 1944. He proposed a round of talks with Jinnah on the basis of the CR formula. So Mahatma Gandhi also wanted to ease this deadlock so that progress towards the transfer of power and independence could take place. And this provided the background for the Gandhi-Jinnah Talks of September 1944. After several rounds of talks, Gandhi was forced to declare the failure of the talks. Okay? Since the CR formula was considered to be a tacit acceptance of Pakistan, many expected the talks are going to be fruitful. However, this did not take place because the two sides differed with with the interpretation of the real meaning of partition. For Gandhi, partition simply represented a separation within the household. भाइयों के बीच में बंटवारा हो जाता है, ऐसा तो नहीं है कि माँ बाप भी अलग अलग हो जाते हैं, रहता तो सेम ही है. That means he interpreted partition to mean that in strict accordance with the CR formula, there would be a common center. Whereas for Jinnah, partition could not mean anything less than a complete break with full sovereignty. That means he rejected the idea of a common center. Okay? The second reason why the talks failed was because of Jinnah's insistence that in this so-called plebiscite, all the people of the Muslim majority districts should not vote. Rather, only Muslims should have the right to vote. इसके पीछे लॉजिक क्या था? पाकिस्तान का डिमांड किसका डिमांड था? Was it a Muslim demand or was it an all India demand of both Hindus and Muslims? It was a Muslim demand. So Jinnah argued that since it was the Muslims who had to decide whether Pakistan should be created or not, Hindus should not interfere. Muslims alone must decide upon this question. Okay? However, this was unacceptable to the Congress. Why? Because it would have validated Jinnah's idea that India is a country of two separate nations, that is a Hindu nation and a Muslim nation. Muslim nation के issues Hindu nation से एकदम अलग हैं and partition affects only Muslims, right? So Jinnah insisted that only Muslims must vote in the plebiscite. ठीक है? And finally, Jinnah also objected to the categorization of the Muslim majority areas of India district wise. Okay? Why? Because for the League and for Jinnah, the Muslim majority areas of India represented the 5 Muslim majority provinces, including Assam as well as NWFP. अब असम और NWFP में अभी भी कांग्रेस का ही रूल था. ठीक है? And as a result, Jinnah feared that in the fight for Pakistan, NWFP and Assam would remain out of it. He was also apprehensive of the fact that many of the border districts of Bengal, where there was a Hindu majority, they might vote against partition. So whatever Bengal or Punjab that they got, that would be also a truncated one, not the entire provinces of Bengal. So Jinnah also objected to the demarcation of Muslim majority areas district wise. Instead, he wanted the whole provinces to be considered as Muslim majority province. Clear hai? So that is why these talks failed and the constitutional deadlock remained in place. Clear? In 1945, Wavell went to England to hold talks with the British Prime Minister as well as the Secretary of State for India. And upon return, he made his intentions clear that he intends to hold a conference at Shimla with participation of all major political parties, including the Congress and Muslim League. The purpose of these talks was also clarified, and that would be to set up an interim government and work out the mechanism for transfer of power and the future constitutional development of India. So Wavell proposed a conference to form an interim government and as a result resolving the constitutional deadlock that existed between the Congress and Muslim League once again became an urgency. And it is in this background that the Desai-Liaqat Pact was formalized. ठीक है, क्या बोला इसने? That any interim government which comes to power would have equal representation of Hindus and Muslims. Right? What was the Congress's response to this? कांग्रेस को मंजूर था या नहीं था? था। इससे कांग्रेस को कोई दिक्कत नहीं होगी। ठीक है, the Congress considered Hindus and Muslims to be important stakeholders in the country's future and they wanted an inclusive form of government. So the Congress leaders and Mahatma Gandhi approved the Desai-Liaqat Pact. लेकिन जिन्ना का सेम रिस्पॉन्स होगा? Yes, he accepted the proposal that Hindus and Muslims should have equal representation, but he put a caveat, एक condition घुसा दिया इसमें। क्या? That only the Muslim League should be allowed to nominate किसको? Hindus या Muslims in the interim government? Muslims. मुस्लिम लीग क्यों बोलेगा कि मुस्लिम लीग को हक होना चाहिए हिंदूज को नॉमिनेट करने का? वो क्या बोलेगा कि हमें एक्सक्लूसिव हक चाहिए मुस्लिम्स को नॉमिनेट करने का, टू नॉमिनेट मुस्लिम मिनिस्टर्स। ठीक है, व्हाट डू यू थिंक द लॉजिक वाज बिहाइंड दिस? Jinnah wanted the Congress to accept that the Muslim League is the sole representative of Indian Muslims and the Congress has no right to nominate any Muslim ministers. And क्या कांग्रेस को ये मंजूर होगा? नहीं होगा। Why? Because that would have validated Jinnah's claim that the Muslim League is the sole representative of Indian Muslims and conversely that would have made the Congress a purely caste Hindu party. ठीक है, and therefore the Congress did not accept this condition and the constitutional deadlock remained in place. ठीक है, and it was this scenario which formed the basis of the Wavell plan of June 1945. तो वेवेल प्लान के पहले इसको एक बार लिख लेते हैं, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल डेडलॉक। सो गिव द हेडिंग कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल डेडलॉक। Write down. The Quit India movement, the Quit India movement had made it clear that the days of British rule in India had made it clear that the days of British rule in India were numbered. Full stop. Therefore, comma, The next step would be to transfer power to an interim government of Indians, till complete independence, with a working constitution, could be attained. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. However, this task was hardly straightforward. Full stop. The Muslim League had been one of the greatest beneficiaries, had been one of the greatest political beneficiaries, of the Second World War, and the Quit India movement. Full stop. Next sub point. It had gained power in the Muslim majority provinces after the Congress's resignation in 1939. Full stop. Next sub point. The League had gained popular support in the Muslim majority areas, with a combination of pro-Muslim policies, and communally divisive rhetoric. Full stop. Essentially, the League had been able to transform the Pakistan demand into a popular demand for a sizable section of Indian Muslims. Next sub point. Further, Further, comma, the League had played a leading role. The League had played a leading role in encouraging the Muslim youth in encouraging the Muslim youth to join the British Indian Army. To join the British Indian Army. In large numbers. In large numbers. Okay? So, two things happened as a result. First of all, the British wanted to reward the League for its loyalty, and secondly, they understood that they could not ignore the League. Why? Because it enjoyed support not only in the general public but also within the armed forces. And if the League sympathizers within the armed forces felt that the League was being ignored and the Congress was being handed leadership, they may revolt, and this may lead to the situation of a civil war. ठीक है, तो next main point लिखो. As such, comma, the League and its demands could not be easily brushed aside. Could not be easily brushed aside. Full stop. It was clear that progress towards the transfer of power and complete independence would not be possible without the consensus without a consensus between both the Congress as well as the League. Between both the Congress as well as the League. Okay? Next main point likho. This set the stage for the emergence of a constitutional deadlock. This set the stage for the emergence of a constitutional deadlock between the Congress and the League. Between the Congress and the League. Full stop. This deadlock revolved around three fundamental constitutional questions. Three fundamental constitutional questions. अब ये टेबल बना सकते हो आप, ठीक है. A, B and C. Nature of the union, nature of the federation and minority representation. Congress wanted a single union, League wanted two separate unions. Congress wanted a strong center, League wanted a weak center, and Congress claimed that it represented all Indians including Indian Muslims, while the League claimed that it represented Indian Muslims exclusively, that apart from it no one had the right to represent Indian Muslims. League supported ideas such as minority veto and special representation, including separate electorates and a reservation in excess of population, whereas the Congress rejected minority veto and special representation. Instead, it argued for universal adult franchise. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. It was important to resolve this deadlock, so that progress on the transfer of power could take place. Full stop. Over 1944-45, comma, two separate Indian attempts were made to resolve the deadlock. 1 and 2. Number 1, CR formula or Rajaji formula of 1944, and number 2, Desai-Liaqat Pact of 1945. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट सब हेडिंग दो, CR formula और Rajaji formula 1944. Write down. Proposed by the veteran Congress leader, C. Rajgopalachari, it is considered to be a tacit acceptance of Pakistan. It is considered to be a tacit acceptance of Pakistan. It proposed colon and dash 1 2 3 4 5 करके लिखना. Number 1, the League should endorse the Congress's demand for complete independence. League should endorse the Congress's demand for complete independence. The League should endorse the Congress's demand for complete independence. Number 2, an interim government should be set up at the center with equal representation should be set up at the center with equal representation from both the League and the Congress. Number 3, after the complete transfer of power, comma, a special commission should be set up to demarcate the Muslim majority areas of northwestern and northeastern India. Full stop. Northwestern and northeastern India by identifying the districts where Muslims were in majority. By identifying the districts where Muslims were in majority. Full stop. It would also divide the border districts into Hindu and Muslim majority areas. Border districts into Hindu and Muslim majority areas. Full stop. A plebiscite would be conducted in the Muslim majority areas, in which all the residents of those areas would vote to decide whether or not to create Pakistan. ठीक है, समझ में आया ये पॉइंट? नंबर 4, in case of partition, comma, common essential services such as defense, communication, commerce, currency, and external affairs, etc., would be administered by a common center. Sub point. Further, the center would have special powers with respect to upholding the integrity of the constitutional machinery upholding the integrity of the constitutional machinery in the provinces. In the provinces. दूसरे वर्ड्स में क्या मतलब हुआ इसका? सेंटर के पास emergency powers होंगी with respect to all the provinces, not only the Hindu majority but the Muslim majority provinces as well. ठीक है? Next sub point, border districts. Border districts would be partitioned. Would be partitioned with Muslim majority areas being merged with Pakistan and Hindu majority areas being merged with Pakistan and Muslim majority areas being merged with India and Hindu majority areas being merged with India. ठीक है? तो कितने प्रपोजल देख लिया हमने? 4. लास्ट वन लिखो, नंबर 5. All these provisions would come into effect only after the complete transfer of power. Only after the complete transfer of power. ठीक है? नेक्स्ट सब हेडिंग दो, गांधी-जिन्ना टॉक्स सितंबर 1944. Gandhi-Jinnah Talks September 1944. Write down. Mahatma Gandhi was released from captivity in May 1944. In May 1944. Subpoint. The Quit India movement had slowed down and the government was seeking the cooperation of the Congress to formulate a mechanism for the transfer of power. Seeking the cooperation of the Congress to formulate a mechanism for the transfer of power. Next subpoint. The war had also swung in favor of Britain. The war had also swung in favor of Britain. And thus, the British could afford to release Gandhi. Could afford to release Gandhi. Next subpoint. Britain's war allies, namely the USA and the USSR, were mounting pressure on her, were mounting pressure on her to liberate India, to liberate India, were mounting pressure on her to liberate India. ठीक है? And for these reasons, Mahatma Gandhi was released in May 1944. Next point, main point. Gandhi wanted a quick resolution of the constitutional deadlock between the Congress and Muslim League. Between the Congress and Muslim League. Full stop. As such, he proposed a round of direct talks between himself and Jinnah. Between himself and Jinnah. Full stop. Jinnah agreed. And the Gandhi-Jinnah talks took place. Gandhi-Jinnah talks took place in September 1944. Took place in September 1944. Full stop. Next point. However, the talks failed to ease the deadlock. Failed to ease the deadlock. And Gandhi was forced, failed to ease, EASE, ease the deadlock. And Gandhi was forced to admit the failure of the negotiations. The failure of the negotiations. Full stop. The talks failed due to the following reasons. Failed due to the following reasons. Failed due to the following reasons. A, B, C, D करके लिख लो. A. Gandhi and Jinnah interpreted partition in very different ways. In very different ways. Full stop. For Gandhi, it represented, comma, it represented a separation within the household. A separation within the household. A separation within the household. Full stop. He insisted upon a common center to regulate important subjects. Full stop. On the other hand, comma, Jinnah interpreted partition as a complete break with full sovereignty for the newly created country of Pakistan. ठीक है. Next sub point B. Jinnah also objected to the participation of Hindus in the plebiscite proposed by the CR formula. Full stop. He argued that since the Pakistan demand was an exclusively Muslim demand, comma, only Muslims should have the right to vote. Only since Pakistan was an exclusively Muslim demand, comma, only Muslims should have the right to vote. Okay? इतना समझ में आया है? Next sub point C. Jinnah also objected to the district-wise demarcation of Muslim majority areas. Full stop. This would have meant the partition of Punjab and Bengal, which had a number of Hindu majority districts. ठीक है? And D लिखो. D. Jinnah also objected to the emergency powers the emergency powers proposed for the center, proposed for the center with respect to, with respect to the breakdown of constitutional machinery, the breakdown of constitutional machinery in the states, the breakdown of constitutional machinery in the states. Why? He felt that this would make the center too powerful and the center may invoke the specter of breakdown of constitutional machinery in order to impose emergency in the states, and thus the Muslim majority provinces of unified India with a strong center would never be able to have real autonomy. Okay, write down. He felt, full stop, he felt that this threatened the autonomy, that this threatened the autonomy of the Muslim majority provinces, of the Muslim majority provinces. He felt that this threatened the autonomy of the Muslim majority provinces. ठीक है? Next main point. Gandhi could not overcome these objections, could not overcome these objections, could not overcome these objections. Full stop. Sub point. The biggest sticking point, the biggest sticking point was the dispute, the biggest sticking point was the dispute regarding the proposed plebiscite, regarding the proposed plebiscite. Full stop. Next sub point. By accepting Jinnah's demand, next sub point. By accepting Jinnah's demand, that only Muslims should decide whether or not to create Pakistan, by accepting Jinnah's demand that only Muslims should decide whether or not to create Pakistan, whether or not to create Pakistan, comma, the Congress, sorry, Gandhi, the Congress name, Gandhi would have accepted the two-nation theory, the two-nation theory. Okay? And this he was not ready to concede. Clear? And as a result, the talks broke down. Gandhiji declared that they had failed. Next, number 2, Desai-Liaqat Pact, 1945. एक था CR फॉर्मूला, दूसरा Desai-Liaqat Pact. Desai-Liaqat Pact, 1945. Write down. In May 1945, in May 1945, comma, the Governor General Lord Wavell proposed a conference, proposed a conference with all prominent parties and leaders, with all prominent parties and leaders, in order to prepare a roadmap, prepare a roadmap for the creation of, for the creation of an interim government, for the creation of an interim government. Full stop. For the creation of an interim government. Full stop. Next point. As such, comma, a resolution of the constitutional deadlock, resolution of the constitutional deadlock between the Congress and League, between the Congress and League became important, became important. Next point. The Desai-Liaqat Pact, the Desai-Liaqat Pact between the Congress leader Bhula Bhai Desai and the Muslim League leader Liaqat Ali Khan, and the Muslim League leader Liaqat Ali Khan. Thank you, sir. And the Muslim League leader Liaqat Ali Khan was an attempt to do the same. Was an attempt to do the same. Okay. Now, unlike the CR formula, this was not a very detailed proposal. क्यों? क्योंकि वो जो डिटेल प्रपोजल था वो तो वेवेल को प्रिपेयर करना था अपने कॉन्फ्रेंस के थ्रू, and therefore the league and the congress simply needed to come to a basic understanding regarding their vision for this future interim government. और उन्होंने डिसाइड क्या था ये बेसिक विजन, ये इसको करेक्ट कर लीजिएगा, इक्वल रिप्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ लीग, of Congress and the League in the interim government. That चाहे जिस तरह का भी interim government गवर्नर जनरल प्रपोज करता है, the Congress and League would have equal number of members in it. ठीक है? Clear? Write down. Unlike the CR formula, next main point, unlike the CR formula, comma, the Desai-Liaqat Pact did not have specific proposals with respect to partition or the constitutional future of India. With respect to partition or the constitutional future of India. ठीक है, कि सेंटर और स्टेट्स के बीच में रिलेशनशिप क्या होगा, एक्सटेंट ऑफ पार्टीशन क्या होगा, ये सब डिस्कशन इसमें नहीं होने चाहिए. सब पॉइंट इंस्टेड it was a limited pact. It was a limited pact that aligned the general vision of the two parties with respect to the composition of the interim government that Wavell was proposing. Of the interim government that Wavell was proposing. ठीक है. Next main point. The two leaders proposed that the Congress and the League would have equal representation in the interim government. The Congress and League would have equal representation in the interim government. Clear hai? Next main point. Mahatma Gandhi, along with the Congress leaders, approved this pact. Why? Because this was a reiteration of the same position taken by the CR formula. उसमें भी क्या प्रपोज किया गया था कि सेंटर में जो इंटरिम गवर्नमेंट बनेगा वहां पे कांग्रेस और लीग का इक्वल मेंबरशिप होगा, इक्वल रिप्रेजेंटेशन होगा. राइट डाउन. Approved this pact. Full stop. It was a continuation of the policy proposed by the CR formula. Next point. Jinnah also gave his approval to the pact but the constitutional deadlock could not be resolved. Why was this? Because of the new caveat inserted by Jinnah that only the Muslim League should be allowed to nominate Muslim ministers. The Congress should not be allowed to. Congress wanted to nominate some Muslim ministers. Firstly, because it was not a caste Hindu party, it was an all India secular party. Secondly, some very prominent Congress leaders were Muslims, including Maulana Azad and Zakir Hussain, both of whom the Congress wanted to nominate to the interim government. Okay? So that is why it was rejected by the Congress. Write down. Sub point. क्या लिखा है अभी आपने? His acceptance to the proposal, but the constitutional deadlock could not be resolved. सब पॉइंट लिखो. This was because Jinnah insisted that the Congress should not nominate any Muslim members to the interim cabinet. Members to the interim cabinet. To the interim cabinet. Full stop. He claimed that the Muslim League, comma, as the sole representative of Indian Muslims, comma, had the exclusive right to nominate Muslim ministers. To nominate Muslim ministers. ठीक है? Next sub point. This condition was not acceptable to the Congress. This condition was not acceptable to the Congress, since it would have reduced the Congress to a caste Hindu party. It would have reduced the Congress to a caste Hindu party and validated the League's claim that it was the only legitimate representative of Indian Muslims. ठीक है? So, as a result, the Desai-Liaqat Pact also failed to resolve the constitutional deadlock that had emerged in Indian politics following the Quit India movement. Now, take down a question. Shed light on the constitutional deadlock that emerged in Indian politics following the Quit India movement. So stop. What were the principles on the basis of which Jinnah prevented the easing of this deadlock? Question mark. 15 marks, 200 words. So this question has to be attempted in two parts. पहला वाला तो आप कर लोगे आसानी से. दूसरा वाला क्या है? What were the principles on the basis of which Jinnah prevented the easing of this constitutional deadlock? सीआर फॉर्मूला को कैसे इसने फेल करवाया? By insisting that only Muslims should have the right to vote, by insisting that partition should take place in the form of a complete break with full sovereignty, by insisting that the provinces as a whole should be demarcated as Muslim majority provinces and not the districts individually, and by insisting that the center should not have any emergency powers with respect to the provincial governments, right? And Desai-Liaqat Pact को किस basis पे fail करवाया? That only the Muslim League should be able to nominate Muslim ministers. अब ये जो grounds हैं for rejection of these attempts to resolve the constitutional deadlock, which principles are they based on? They are based on the principles of the two nation theory. What does this two nation theory propose? That Hindus and Muslims who are both residents of India do not constitute a single nation. They constitute two separate nations, a separate Hindu nation and a separate Muslim nation. Since the Hindus are in majority, Muslims will never be able to prosper in the same nation state as Hindus, and thus Muslims deserve their own nation state or Pakistan. Should Pakistan and India have a common center or two separate centers? Two separate centers, because in the entire, with the common center, there would be an overwhelming Hindu majority and it would be able to suffocate the aspirations of Muslims. Therefore, Pakistan must be created by completely breaking away from India and granting full sovereignty to the newly created state of Pakistan. Secondly, who should decide whether to create Pakistan or not? It would exclusively be the Muslims who should decide, since within the framework of the two nation theory, the demand for Pakistan and the necessity of Pakistan has come from the Muslims only. It is important to protect Muslim interests and therefore Hindus should not interfere, should not participate in this process. Okay? Thirdly, who is the representative of Indian Muslims, the Muslim nation? According to Jinnah, the Muslim League exclusively. According to him, the Hindus had their own exclusive representative, that is the Congress. And since the Congress is actively representing the Hindu interests, in whose interest it is to maintain unity, because they would inherit a large subcontinental country, could the Congress ever be expected to truly represent the interests of Muslims? No, according to Jinnah, नहीं कर सकते हैं. क्यों? क्योंकि वो हिंदुओं की तरफदारी कर रहे हैं. प्रूफ क्या है इसका? That they want united India, right? According to Jinnah. Why? Because they want to prevent the Muslims from realizing their political aspirations. And since the Congress has been proven to be a caste Hindu party, could it also claim to represent Muslims at the same time? No. So that is why Muslims deserve their own representative, and that is the मुस्लिम लीग. ठीक है, तो ये वही वाले प्रिंसिपल्स हैं जो कि हमने शुरू में देखे हैं. Two separate unions, a weak center and exclusive representation of Indian Muslims. ठीक है, so that is what you need to emphasize upon. So these were the principles on the basis of which Jinnah prevented the easing of this deadlock. Why do you think he was interested in the prevention of the easing of deadlock? Why was he interested in the continuation of the deadlock? Because Jinnah wanted to obtain something. What did he want to obtain? क्या चाहता था? Not only separate electorate or Pakistan, he wanted to obtain a minority veto, otherwise translated as a league veto. ठीक है? Now, if this constitutional deadlock could have been resolved before the Wavell plan was outlined, then there would have been no necessity of granting this so-called league veto to the Muslim League or to Jinnah. Jinnah wanted to preserve the interests of the Muslims in perpetuity. He was not looking for short-term solutions, he was looking for permanent solutions. And the interim government that was proposed by Wavell was supposed to prepare the roadmap for the future constitutional development of India. And उस constitutional machinery को design करते समय जिस भी पार्टी के पास एक constitutional veto होगा, they would be able to shape that machinery intimately. ठीक है? That is what Jinnah was more interested in at this point of time. कि मान लो वो interim government कुछ ऐसे provisions डाल देता है which make the creation of Pakistan impossible. But even then he wanted a weak center, for instance, right? तो कम से कम वो तो डाल सकते हैं. He wanted that in the Muslim majority provinces the Congress should never be able to get a foothold. So he could have provided for that by insisting upon the continuation of separate electorates even after the introduction of universal adult franchise, for example, or the continuation of the principle that Muslims must be given representation in excess of their population, or by insisting that irrespective of the share of population of Muslims in the entire country, at least 50% of the ministers must come from only the Muslim League or must be Muslim, and Muslim League should have the exclusive right to represent Muslims in the future central government also, right? तो इस तरह के proposals को insert करने के लिए क्या जरूरी था? Minority veto, and that is what Jinnah was searching for at this point of time. Is this much clear? तो अभी समझ में आया है कि इसको अप्रोच कैसे करना है. पहला वाला पोर्शन तो आप कर लोगे, दूसरा वाला पोर्शन ये यही प्रिंसिपल्स हैं ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ व्हिच जिन्ना वाज ट्राइंग टू प्रिवेंट. व्हाई? क्योंकि ऑब्जेक्टिव उसके लिए क्लियर था. ही वांटेड टू ऑब्टेन वीटो फॉर द माइनॉरिटीज. क्लियर? चलिए, तो ये हो गया द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल डेडलॉक एंड द फेलियर ऑफ द अटेम्प्ट्स टू रिजॉल्व इट. It was in such a scenario that the conference that that Wavell had proposed finally took place in June 1945 at Shimla. Right? So, Shimla conference and the Wavell plan. June 1945. ठीक है. Now, in April 1945, all the prominent Congress leaders were also released. Leaders such as Patel, Nehru, Maulana Azad, etc. They were all released from prison. In May of 1945, Wavell proposed the Shimla Conference, and shortly after this, the Desai-Liaqat Pact was signed, but it failed to resolve the constitutional deadlock. Finally, in June 1945, Indian leaders from different political parties congregated at Shimla for a conference with the Governor General. So 21 leaders were present. The Shimla Conference was convened, and here the Governor General laid out his proposal for the creation of a constituent assembly as well as the formation of an interim government in the meanwhile, right? So the Wavell plan was proposed, and the provisions of the Wavell plan were the terms on the basis of which the discussions were to take place in the शिमला कॉन्फ्रेंस. तो उन टर्म्स के बेसिस पर ही एक सहमति बनानी थी. कंसेंसस हैड टू बी जनरेटेड बिटवीन दी डिफरेंट पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज. सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट कौन कौन थे, किसकी सहमति सबसे ज्यादा जरूरी थी? कांग्रेस और मुस्लिम लीग की. ठीक है. तो वेवेल ने क्या प्रपोज किया? दैट इन द इंटरिम dominion status would be granted to India. He proposed that the Governor General's Executive Council would be reconstituted, and different portfolios are going to be given to the Indian leaders, and this reconstituted Governor General's Executive Council would function as the interim government. Okay? So in this interim government, he proposed that Hindus and Muslims would have equal number of cabinet portfolios. Okay? And all the members of the Governor General's Council would be Indians except for the Governor General himself and the Commander in Chief. All councillors except the Governor General and Commander in Chief would be Indians. And thirdly, a constituent assembly would be created consisting of only Indians to draft a new constitution for India. Okay. Now it was proposed that the Governor General's Executive Council would be enlarged to include a total of 16 members. Okay. Propose क्या किया गया? That one would be the Governor General himself, one would be the Commander in Chief, and there would be how many Indians? बाकी बचे हुए 14 Indians. ठीक है? Out of which there would be 5 Hindu, 5 Muslim, 1 Sikh, 1 Anglo-Indian, 1 depressed classes, and 1 special Punjabi representative. ठीक है? तो 5 मिनिस्टर्स हिंदूज होंगे, 5 मुस्लिम्स होंगे, 1 each from Sikhs, Anglo-Indians, depressed classes, and 1 special representative from Punjab. टोटल कितने हो गए? 14 plus 2 16. Clear? Now Governor General would continue to function as the head of government, as the head of the state till the Constituent Assembly completes the process of drafting its constitution. And the Constituent Assembly would have the freedom to decide whether India would continue as a dominion of the British Empire or it would become completely independent. Okay? So Constituent Assembly had the option to decide the constitutional future of India as a dominion of the British Empire or as a fully sovereign independent nation. ठीक है? Apart from this, no further details were mentioned. क्यों? क्योंकि बाकी further details we will had left up to the various Indian representatives of the Shimla conference to decide. ठीक है? कि princely states को participate करना चाहिए या नहीं करना चाहिए. What should be the basis of creation of this constituent assembly? Should there be a reorganization of the different provinces? What should be the basis of that reorganization? यूनिवर्सल फ्रेंचाइज होना चाहिए या नहीं होना चाहिए? डेमोक्रेटिक एक्सरसाइज का बेसिस क्या होना चाहिए? किस तरह का फेडरेशन होगा? राइट, ऑल ऑफ दैट वाज लेफ्ट टू द कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली टू डिसाइड. ठीक है? अब कॉन्स्टिट्यूएंट असेंबली तो इमीडिएटली नहीं बन सकता है, पहले उसके लिए एक मैकेनिज्म क्रिएट करना जरूरी है. इसमें सबसे इमीडिएट सेंस में क्या चेंजेस हो सकते हैं वेवल प्लान के हिसाब से? सबसे पहली चीज क्या होगी? द क्रिएशन ऑफ एन interim government, right? And it is with regards to the composition of the interim government that the talks broke down. Why do you think the talks broke down? Once again, जिन्ना कौन सा टेप चलाएगा ना? वही घिसा पिटा पुराना टेप. क्या कि जितने भी मुस्लिम मेंबर्स हैं इंटरिम गवर्नमेंट में, वो किसको नॉमिनेट करने चाहिए? मुस्लिम लीग को। क्या बोलेगा? कांग्रेस इज अ कास्ट हिंदू पार्टी, इट शुड लिमिट इटसेल्फ ओनली टू नॉमिनेटिंग हिंदू मेंबर्स, राइट? ये सारे मेंबर्स कहां से आने चाहिए? मुस्लिम लीग एक्सक्लूसिवली। ये सारे मेंबर्स कहां से आने चाहिए? कांग्रेस करना चाहे तो कर सकता है, अदरवाइज अदर्स कैन आल्सो कंट्रीब्यूट। ठीक है। Do you think the Congress would have been ready to accept this proposal? No. Maulana Azad, who was at that time the serving president of the Congress, 1940 रामगढ़ सेशन, मार्च 1940 में रामगढ़ में सेशन हुआ था, वहां पे इनको एज कांग्रेस प्रेसिडेंट इलेक्ट किया गया था। उसके बाद से कांग्रेस का कोई सेशन ही नहीं हुआ था। Therefore, he was continuing as the Congress president, and at the time of the Wavell Plan, Shimla Conference, he was still the Congress president. Now, Congress wanted to nominate him as one of the important ministers. It also wanted to nominate Dr. Zakir Hussain as its ministers. Okay? Now, if it accepted the Muslim League's proposal that only Muslim League should be able to nominate Muslims, तो यहाँ पे केवल दो ऑप्शन बचते। एक तो कि इन दोनों का पत्ता कटता, और दे वुड बोथ हैव टू जॉइन दी मुस्लिम लीग एज वेल। नुकसान क्या होता दूसरे केस में? that the Congress would have accepted that it was a caste Hindu party, and that is what Jinnah was trying to do. He was not actually interested in finding any solution. He in fact wanted to disrupt the proceedings. Why? He wanted the talks to break down, and he wanted the Governor General to admit the talks had broken down because Jinnah did not agree to them. जिन्ना ने कुछ ऐसा डिमांड रेज कर दिया कि टॉक्स आगे नहीं बढ़ पाए। व्हाई? बिकॉज दिस वुड हैव हैंडेड अ वीटो टू जिन्ना, टू दी मुस्लिम लीग। दैट इज व्हाट ही वाज सर्चिंग फॉर। ठीक है। तो अभी बताओ, कांग्रेस एक्सेप्ट करेगा इस प्रपोजल को? नहीं करेगा। द टास्क ऑफ द गवर्नर जनरल इन दिस सिनेरियो, जो वेवेल है, उसका रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी क्या बनता था ऐसे में? that he should work to create a consensus between the two sides कि अच्छा चलो ठीक है, ये वाले इशू पे अभी सहमति नहीं बन पा रही है, let us talk about other things. But what did Wavell do? He stuck to the dispute itself. Instead of minimizing differences, he continued to widen the gulf. जितने भी रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स थे उसने उसको अलग अलग चेम्बर्स में बिठा दिया, and then he started acting as the interlocutor between them. He went from room to room, leader to leader, and said that ये वाला बंदा आपके लिए ऐसा ऐसा बोल रहा है, ये वाली गाली दी आपको, राइट? तो इनफैक्ट ऐसा नहीं हुआ, बट इंस्टेड ऑफ ब्रिजिंग द गैप, ही वाइडेंड द गल्फ बिटवीन द two sides. And when the two sides were at their furthest, he declared the talks had broken down, talks had failed. And साथ में क्या डिक्लेयर किया? टॉक्स फेल क्यों हुए? कांग्रेस तो रेडी था कुछ चीजें एक्सेप्ट करने के लिए, लीग वाज नॉट रेडी टू पार्टिसिपेट। एंड इसकी वजह से हुआ क्या? इट बिकेम क्लियर टू ऑल द पार्टीज इन्वॉल्व्ड, एंड इट बिकेम अ ब्रिटिश पॉलिसी दैट इन द फ्यूचर नो स्कीम फॉर डिसाइडिंग इंडियाज कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल फ्यूचर could be formulated without the approval of the league. League had in its hand a powerful veto. कोई भी प्रपोजल वो वीटो कर सकता था, एंड द कांग्रेस वुड हैव टू एक्सेप्ट इट, द ब्रिटिश वुड हैव टू एक्सेप्ट इट। ठीक है। नाउ कई हिस्टोरियंस ने डिस्प्यूट किया है दैट व्हाई वेवेल एक्टेड इन सच अ मैनर। क्यों? Wavell was a member of the British Armed Forces. He was a military general, आर्मी का जनरल था, राइट? एंड सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर में कांग्रेस का रवैया कैसा था टुवर्ड्स द ब्रिटिश? प्रो और अगेंस्ट? Against. Wavell felt that the reluctance of the Congress to give support to the British during the Second World War had prolonged the war. अगर कांग्रेस ने फुल फ्लेजेड सपोर्ट दिया होता तो वॉर 2 साल पहले ही खत्म हो गया होता, राइट? Britain would have been able to maintain its preeminent position on the world stage and not lost it completely to the Soviets and the Americans. Britain would also have been in a position to preserve its global empire, but now it was being forced to dissolve it, and Wavell was being given the responsibility of overseeing this dissolution in the case of India. Therefore, he was in a mood to reward the Congress or punish the Congress. Punish the Congress. Okay. Secondly, Wavell also felt that since the Muslim League had helped the British, it should be rewarded. ठीक है. So personal bias का एक तो एंगल था. Secondly, दूसरा एंगल क्या था? The League had also gained a great degree of influence both within the public opinion as well as the armed forces. Right? अब एक साइड पे आईएनए मूवमेंट की स्ट्रगल चल रही थी और वहीं पे अगर लीग सिंपथाइजर्स रिबेल कर देते हैं आर्मी के अंडर आर्मी के अंदर, व्हाट वुड हैपन टू द ब्रिटिश एम्पायर? इट वुड क्रम्बल. वो ऑर्डरली डिसोल्यूशन नहीं हो पाएगा. ब्रिटिश प्रेस्टीज इज गोइंग टू बी हर्ट एंड द रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन इंडियन हिंदूज, Indian Muslims and the British are going to be permanently soured. Wavell's responsibility was to effect a break in such a manner कि डिवोर्स तो हो जाए लेकिन बच्चों के लिए कस्टडी बैटल ना हो. राइट? That means an amicable dissolution of the empire should take place so that goodwill between India and the British that could be preserved. तो ताकि ब्रिटिश कॉमर्स, ब्रिटिश ट्रेड के जो इंटरेस्ट है इंडिया में, they could be preserved. And that is why he considered it important to involve the Muslim League in any future dialogue. And उसके लिए उसको लगा that League को veto देना जरूरी है. Thirdly, he knew that the League would insist upon the creation of Pakistan with the partition of India. Right? And if India was partitioned, it would emerge as a weak power or a strong power? As a weak power, right? A strong India may have been in a position to challenge the continuation of British influence in India, but a weak India would not be able to challenge it. Through Pakistan, because Pakistan could be created only with the favor of the British, through Pakistan, the British wanted to maintain their presence in the subcontinent, क्योंकि यहाँ पे एक बहुत strategic importance वाला region था, right? It gave the British control over the entire Indian Ocean region. जितने important energy highways हैं वो Indian Ocean region के through cross करके जाते थे. The sea lanes of open communication connecting the whole of Asia with the whole of Europe, they pass through the Indian Ocean. That is why the British wanted to maintain a permanent presence in the subcontinent in Pakistan. And the British felt that by helping create Pakistan, they would be able to maintain a good relationship with future Pakistan. Clear? So that is what was the factors behind it. Clear hai? Now give the next heading. Shimla Conference and the Wavell Plan. Shimla Conference and the Wavell Plan. Write down. In April 1945, all prominent Congress leaders, including Pandit Nehru, Sardar Patel, and Maulana Azad, were released. Next point. In May 1945, Wavell proposed a conference. With Indian leaders at Shimla outline with Indian leaders out proposed a conference with Indian leaders at Shimla to outline the terms of transferring power to Indians and creating a mechanism for the drafting of a constitution for independent India. Drafting of a constitution for independent India. ठीक है? नेक्स्ट सब पॉइंट लिखो, सब पॉइंट इसमें the Desai-Liaqat Pact, the Desai-Liaqat Pact was finalized to outline the shared vision of the League and the Congress with respect to the interim government. Shared vision of the League and the Congress with respect to the interim government. But it failed to resolve the constitutional deadlock. It failed to resolve the constitutional deadlock. Next point. Resolve the constitutional deadlock. Next main point. June 1945. Twenty-one leaders, including Nehru, Patel, Azad, and Jinnah, met at Shimla, where Wavell proposed a plan to transfer power and enumerate the terms for the basis of India's future constitutional development. Full stop. The Wavell plan proposed. Next point में the Wavell plan proposed. A, B, and C. A. Dominion status would be granted to India. Dominion status would be granted to India. Dominion status would be granted to India. B. An interim government would be established immediately. An interim government would be established immediately by reconstituting the Governor General's Executive Council. By reconstituting the Governor General's Executive Council. Full stop. Except for same point, except for the Governor General and Commander in Chief, all other members would be Indian. All other members would be Indian. Full stop. Subpoint. Wavell proposed that the interim government would be constituted by a total of 16 councillors, including 16 councillors, including the Governor General and Commander in Chief, who would be British, and 14 Indians, out of which there would be 5 councillors each from Hindus and Muslims, 5 councillors each from Hindus and Muslims, and 1 councillor each from Sikhs, Anglo-Indians, depressed classes, and Punjab. ठीक है, ये हो गया सेकंड प्रपोजल. सी लिखो. थर्ड प्रपोजल सी. A constituent assembly would be established. Consisting of only Indians. A constituent assembly would be established consisting of only Indians to draft a constitution for India. Full stop. it would have the freedom, it would have the freedom to decide India's constitutional future, to decide India's constitutional future, either as a dominion of the British Empire, either as a dominion of the British Empire, or as a fully sovereign independent nation, or as a fully sovereign independent nation. ठीक है? नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो, before any specifics with respect to the constituent assembly, comma, its composition or mandate could be finalized, comma, the talks broke down, on the question of minority representation in the interim government, on the question of minority representation in the interim government. Full stop. Next point. Jinnah once again insisted that all the Muslim members in the interim government must come exclusively, all the Muslim members of the interim government must come exclusively from the Muslim League. Next point. Understandably, comma, the Congress rejected this demand. Next point. Instead of trying to bridge the gap between the two sides, comma, instead of trying to bridge the gap between the two sides, comma, Wavell widened the gap and then suddenly called off the conference. And then suddenly called off the conference. Called off the conference. Full stop. Next point. He declared that the conference had failed. That the conference had failed because of Jinnah's objections. Jinnah's objections. Full stop. Objections. Objections. Full stop. Subpoint. This virtually handed a veto to the Jinnah and Muslim League. To the Jinnah and Muslim League. To Jinnah and the Muslim League. To Jinnah and the Muslim League. To Jinnah and the Muslim League. Full stop. Next subpoint. No future scheme of constitutional development could succeed without the approval of the Muslim League. Without the approval of the Muslim League. ठीक है. Next main point. While there is no consensus among historians, regarding the strategy adopted by Wavell, comma, the following observations have been made. The point. Wavell harbored personal and professional resentment against the Congress. Full stop. As a military general, against the Congress, full stop. As a military general, he felt that the Quit India movement had directly contributed to prolonging the war. Which played a direct role in the decline of Britain as the preeminent global power. Next sub point. Wavell was interested in the partition of India. Was interested in the partition of India. Full stop. He expected the future government of Pakistan to be a British ally, to be a British ally and a strategic partner in the strategically important. He expected the future government of Pakistan to be a British ally and a strategic partner in the strategically important Indian Ocean region. In the strategically important Indian Ocean region. Full stop. Next sub point. Further, he felt that the League must be rewarded. The League must be rewarded for its loyalty during the war. For its loyalty during the war. Next sub point. If the League's demands were ignored, comma, sympathetic Muslim soldiers may rebel, leading to a complete breakdown of authority, leading to a complete breakdown of authority and a civil war. A complete breakdown of authority and a civil war. ठीक है. And lastly लिखो, a Congress-led United India would definitely lean left. Leaning left मतलब सोशलिस्ट इन्फ्लुएंस बढ़ाएगा वहां पर. ठीक है. Would definitely lean left, bringing it closer to the Soviet Union. In this case, पाकिस्तान का क्या यूटिलिटी होगा? To serve as a counterweight against the communist dominated India. ठीक है. And thus Pakistan may serve as a bastion of capitalism, in South Asia. As a fortress of capitalism in South Asia. ठीक है. So these were the ideas that probably motivated Wavell to bring about the breakdown of the Wavell plan and the Shimla conference. Result क्या हुआ? It gave veto power to the Muslim League and virtually ensured the occurrence of partition along with independence. Okay, तो ये हो गया Wavell plan and the Shimla conference. And इसके बाद हमको कुछ छोटे छोटे टॉपिक्स डिस्कस करने हैं. The INA movement and the Red Fort trials, followed by the three upsurges of the winter of 1945, 46, including the Royal Indian Naval Mutiny, followed by the Cabinet Mission Plan, and finally the Mountbatten Plan, which prepared the blueprint for India's independence along with partition. These we are going to discuss in tomorrow's lecture. ठीक है, तो ज़्यादा बड़े टॉपिक्स नहीं हैं, छोटे छोटे ही हैं. इसमें ना समझने का बहुत ज़्यादा है, ना लिखने का बहुत ज़्यादा है. स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड कहानी है, तो ये हो जाने चाहिए कल. एंड विद दैट वील बी कवरिंग आवर सिलेबस ऑफ मॉडर्न इंडिया. कंप्लीट हो जाएगा ये कल, राइट. और उसके बाद हमको एक और सेगमेंट करना है, दैट इज पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस इंडिया. This we are going to cover in the next week. ठीक है, तो 5-6 क्लासेस में ये भी कवर हो जाना चाहिए पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस इंडिया. ऑलराइट, एनी डाउट्स आज की क्लास में जो सीखा है हमने? नहीं, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल डेडलॉक सारे पॉइंट्स क्लियर हैं. कोई क्वेश्चन आता है तो हो जाएगा. वेवेल प्लान, बैकग्राउंड क्या था, प्रपोजल क्या था, व्हाई इट फेल्ड, व्हाट वाज द एटीट्यूड ऑफ वेवेल, ये सब क्लियर है. चलिए देन, थैंक यू फॉर योर टाइम. कल मिलते हैं.